This second era spans the years 1941 to 1956. It can be called the building era. If you visited Norway in the last couple hundred years, even today, you would find what's considered a folk church, a church of the land, a church of the people. Typically, a folk church is neither high nor low, liberal nor fundamentalist, rich nor poor. It's the people's church. One strain of Norwegian spirituality leaned more toward liturgy, the sacramental life, and the official clergy-led parish. The other strain of Norwegian spirituality leaned more toward freedom, conversion, and lay-led ministry. Trinity, like so many Norwegian background congregations, held both strains, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in tension. As the Trinity congregation found its footing in San Pedro, and particularly among Norwegian fishing and seagoing communities, it existed as what could be considered a folk church. In 1937, the congregation had voted to discontinue the Norwegian language and conduct all services in English. Not long after, the Seamen's Mission, the Church of Norway, took up the work of outreach in the Norwegian language to the still substantial Scandinavian traffic coming through our port and the more stable expat community. In many ways, this freed Trinity for a much more American, community-based focus, though a strong affection and connection has continued between Trinity and the Seamen's Church up to this day. After serving 7 years, Reverend O.J. Edwards retired and was succeeded by Dr. Melvin Andrews in July of 1941. These are Dr. Andrews' own words. After 17 years in Benson, we accepted a call to San Pedro, California. Our first house of worship was inadequate, but soon the members began to entertain the idea of purchasing a new site and building a new church. The members gave hundreds of hours of donated labor in the construction of the church. The Ladies' Aid installed a pipe organ, pulpit, baptismal font, altar hangings in the 4 liturgical colors, and 8 stained glass windows were donated by certain families of the congregation. Trinity Church San Pedro is a beautiful and inviting sanctuary. Our first years in San Pedro were trying ones. During the first 8 years, we had no parsonage, lived in apartments, paying the rent out of our modest salary, so modest, in fact, that we had to supplement it by working nights in a shipyard. But in due time, the congregation purchased a parsonage and increased our salary. Both Edwards and Andrews were very hard-working pastors, sometimes, as you heard, working other jobs to make ends meet. You could always find Pastor Andrews not only in the pulpit, but also behind the organ or piano, recording multi-layers of clarinet, oboe, French horn, tuba, and other instruments that he played. You could also find him mowing the lawn, vacuuming the church, printing the bulletin. This was the building era. The Reverend Dr. Andrews previously served in Benson, Minnesota with his wife, Oranda. Dr. Andrews was truly a Renaissance man, artistic, musical, poetic, well-read, and a polyglot. I interviewed his granddaughter recently, whom he and Oranda raised, Deborah Andrews Otterson. She said that Dr. Andrews considered his years at Trinity full of joy and full of challenge. He particularly loved Sandgren's multi-volume biography of Abraham Lincoln, and whenever he'd use it for a sermon illustration, one pious woman always sent him a letter saying it was unbecoming that a preacher of the gospel would use any illustration from the life of Abraham Lincoln. Deborah said he would sit down at the typewriter, fire off a heated response, pull the letter out of the typewriter, and rip it up. Good therapy. He was the right person for the building era. The original Mission Church structure was moved from 10th and Elma to 7th and Broadway in 1948 and is now the rear half of the sanctuary and library, which is now being renovated. The cost of the present church was greatly reduced by members who donated several hundred hours of manual labor in its construction to the glory of God. Dr. Andrews' correspondences with the famous family-owned Glazier, LA-based Judson Studios were detailed and demanding in assuring that our current sanctuary beautifully proclaimed the centrality of Jesus Christ, his birth, life and teaching, death and resurrection, and after serving Trinity for 15 years, Dr. Andrews retired in June of 1956.